person. I was tempted to call her Minister of Propaganda since she's handing out all this stuff y'all know already, but I do not want to sully her reputation.
I don't know, it's for Edith.
We have Stevenson. Definitely not Edith.
Patrick's also with the office. He's fairly new. We're not sure what he does, but he's here. I'd love this to be just a conversation, whatever y'all want to talk about. I'm happy to just start talking, but with a politician it's dangerous because it might not stop. So, a lot of issues going on. Probably the newest thing is the district is finalized by the legislature, so it looks like all of Davidson County, and almost all of Cheatham County. So it's actually more cohesive from a county standpoint than it's been in a long time. It used to be, of course, that Nashville had like 7 precincts in the south, Free Hall, Forest Hills, Oak Hill, that were taken out, put in the Memphis district. That craziness is over, so that's a good thing. Any redistricting has a lot of upheaval, and most of the upheaval seems to be at the state senate, state house level. And that requires street level maps. As far as I know, nobody has seen those maps. I haven't seen them. It was, again, a largely secretive process. I'm not blaming either party. Both parties love this gerrymandering stuff. But at least at my level, this looks like a relatively coherent map. And of course, that's what Mayor Dean and I had pushed for early on, because we were worried about this overall Republican plan to wipe out pretty much any city's political power. They did it with Austin, Texas. They've even tried it in Salt Lake City. And like, is there a more Republican place in America than Utah? But they just hate the cities, it seems like. So this is a way at least we'll have cities unified. Because I think the bottom line truth was a lot of my Republican colleagues wanted Belmead, Forest Hills. None of them wanted the rest of Davidson. In fact, kind of scared them, and I think in a good way, because they basically viewed Nashville as undigestible politically. If they could have chopped it up and each one swallowed a little bit of it, they would have done it. But it was too much for them to swallow. Because when they found out that like Mike McWhirter carried Davidson County and he only carried 2 counties in Tennessee, they thought, oh my God, these are Democrats. So there, who knows what? I wasn't privy to the discussions. They let me testify once just because the legislature put out a call back in the fall for the public to submit a plan. I said, hey, I'm a member of the public. I've got 2 plans, and so I testified as a result of that, but I'm not sure they paid any attention.
Did any of your plans have Dixon County in there?
None.
Yeah.
No. In fact, there's a rumor that even a week ago, the map was completely different. It kept Davidson County whole. Then it had a long finger going down I-24 to Murfreesboro. And then I would have the MTSU campus, which is like a bubble. So it was billed as the urban academic district. And I thought, whoa, I can deal with that. Hey, thank you.
We'll have a better space for you soon. We're renovating.
Oh, no, this is good. This is good. Thanks. But apparently, the rumor was, all this is rumor, Bill Cutran didn't like that because that's his county and it would have been split. And that would have looked awkward, even though he would have minded probably getting rid of all the MTSU folks. But anyway, that didn't happen. Suddenly they changed that. So it was changing until the last minute and finally locked in on this.
Well, Dixon is not very red, is it? I mean,
I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems like they pretty regularly vote Democrat. It's like you can almost tell, like, all the Vandy people who can't afford to live closer. Like, there's like a line of them right there. So that's...
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, I don't know if it's on my resume or not. I was born in Nashville. My mother had great foresight, but I was actually raised in Shelbyville, Tennessee, which is 50 miles south, which is a lot like Dixon. One county outside the Nashville ring, where a lot of the folks who can't afford the ring counties go, and also folks who want a little more peace and quiet. So I'll be headed to Dixon County shortly and meet all the good folks there. But I talk all day long about federal issues. They're boring to most people. They're my bread and butter. I like them. And I'm excited because actually finally people are paying attention to the debt and deficit. That used to be off everybody's radar screen. Now people are focusing. That's good. Healthcare has always been an issue of mine, and I'm teaching again at Vanderbilt this year. Just finished a 3-hour class yesterday morning. And healthcare is key to not only our debt and deficit issues, but also implementation of healthcare reform, which I voted for, which is an essential thing, still widely misunderstood. Tons of folks willfully want to misunderstand. And of course, the Supreme Court will weigh in this summer. I think the court will uphold the individual mandate. There's another grounds of attack that no one had even imagined before, which was, it's called the Medicaid coercion argument. The states are complaining, but this would be, hey Drew, this would be a brand new attack. So, welcome. Come join us.
I went to Hillsborough Village.
Oh, no.
Did you for Fido?
No, I'm sorry. We had thought about Fido, and we thought that would be too crowded.
Yeah, it was crowded.
All these places.
Now they're looking for you over there. You'll have to make another stop.
Uh-oh. I was kind of intrigued by their sign on the counters, and when it gets too crowded, we turn off our Wi-Fi. That's a good way to clear the place.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of harsh. Like,
Right.
if the government were to do that, we'd be accused of censorship. But a private business can do that.
Well, you're going to cut their pay, so.
Well, that's right. Only if we miss deadlines, which we've been doing, but I think that would make Congress do a lot. Drew's referring to this idea. The No Labels group, which is kind of, it's really not nonpartisan, it's kind of apolitical, this reform movement. Mayor Bloomberg of New York helped start it, and now other folks have taken over it. The idea is if we miss too many important deadlines, you stop paying congressmen. Now, the impact of that was we'd meet the deadlines, because everybody wants to be paid. But sometimes, deadlines are the most creative force in the world. I know how I was in school. I know how I still am. If it's not a deadline, this is the no labels package. The no budget, no pay thing is the lead one that's already introduced. Normally, this would be like good government, goo-goo, happy talk. But this year, when Congress is less popular than Adolf Hitler, there's actually a chance that something like this could pass, because if the choice my colleagues see is between extinction or reform, they might choose reform. I can't guarantee that. But in a normal year, when it's business as usual versus reform, they pick business as usual. But now a lot of folks have the fear of the Lord in them, thinking, hey, this is the end of the world. So they're actually considering bolder reforms than they would have otherwise, which I think is a good thing.
Well, some of them are so wealthy they don't care, like Diane Black maybe. Talking about the Medicaid coercion.
Okay. The Medicaid coercion argument is a new argument. The indication we have of what the Supreme Court is interested in is they schedule this historically long 5 hours of argument. They've never done that before. Normally it's an hour, or maybe 2 for a really important case. This is 5. One of the issues they're looking at is whether this is even a right case, whether the Federal Anti-Injunction Act would apply. And that's largely a tax-based thing where if nobody's had to pay any tax yet, then nobody's been hurt.
Right.
And nobody's really been hurt by health reform yet. None of these taxes have kicked in. So maybe it's premature for the court. They like to dodge any bullet headed their way, and I don't blame them. So there's an hour on that. There's like 2 hours on the individual mandate. There's like an hour on severability, whether if they strike down part of the law, they tap down the whole law. And this is a terrible drafting mistake the Senate made. They forgot the severability clause. And like in anybody's apartment lease or car payment contract, there's a severability clause saying if for some reason part of this is unconstitutional, the rest of it still stands. Well, that's not there, but most sensible people say, hey, the court would read that in, because everybody intended it, it just went in there. So,
Well, hasn't the Obama administration argued that it isn't severable? Like you can't have a mandate and you can't not have a mandate and still make insurance companies cover the sick or the people that have no exclusions.
well, they've argued that that's an economic argument. That's not really a severability argument. They don't want the whole law to fall down. But they're exactly right. Without compelling folks to buy insurance, there'd be too many free riders, and it would hurt health reform, probably cripple it. So it's very important that the mandate be in there. And as a matter of constitutional law, there would be no question this is constitutional if the states impose the mandate. See, under our old-fashioned Constitution, and it's a great Constitution, I'm not bad-mouthing it, but states have certain powers, and they have the power to mandate things. And they have done it with car insurance. You can't drive down the road. That's a state mandate. Another thing that would be unquestioned constitutional would be if the federal taxing power were involved, and we just flat out tax people who didn't buy the insurance. We try to be a little bit gentler than that, but there's a legal argument that, hey, it's really a disguised taxing power, so it's constitutional. So anyway, I think the individual mandate is going to be upheld, stand, be law. I do not think they'll tear down the whole law if for some reason they were to find a flaw in it. But this last argument that they've scheduled an hour for is the Medicaid coercion argument. And stop me if I don't want to. Medicare is for seniors and for disabled people. Medicaid is for poor people of all ages. Okay? So this Medicaid argument is that because Medicaid is such a large portion of state budgets now, upwards of 30%, that this is coercive to the states. This argument has never, ever been upheld by any court anywhere. The argument has been made, but it's never been upheld. Now, what is going on here is that looks kind of mean to the states if we say, hey, you have to spend 30% of your budget to keep your own people healthy. This is not like...
Well, and I mean, it's not as if those costs go away anyway. I mean, if Sean doesn't have insurance and he goes to the hospital, I still pay for it when my hospital bills go up to cover him. So it's not really as if, I mean, that's to me the part that seems like a disingenuous missing piece of this is it's not as if you can just say like, oh, it's such a huge part of our budget. Because it would still be a huge part of the taxpayer's budget. Our money is still going towards it. It just, will it go ineffectually towards what the hospitals have decided, or will it?
You're totally right, and that's the economic argument, and that's why we have to have the mandate.
Right.
And the administration has filed a brief making that argument that this isn't like buying, a bushel of wheat.
Right.
This is essential to the economic workings of the system. The Medicaid coercion argument really boils down to federal-state partnership. Medicaid has always been a federal-state match thing, and the rich states pay 50%, the federal government pays 50%. Tennessee being a poorer state, the federal government pays 67%, and the state pays 33%. That's a pretty good deal. But it's gotten to be an even better deal because under healthcare reform, the feds are either paying 100% of new expansion populations, so it's free to the states, or after about 5 years, that'll be reduced, and then the feds will pay 90%, which is a totally awesome, great deal for the states. So how is that coercive? If the previous program was legal and constitutional for 40 or 50 years at a 67 match or a 50% match, why are they going to strike down 90% or 100%? I just don't see how they make it. There's actually a very interesting and very knowledgeable local law professor, Jim Blumstein at Vanderbilt Law School, who's one of the leading national voices on this Medicaid coercion argument. He is Bigfoot on this issue, and he is somebody worth talking to. A lot of folks have been calling him up nationwide to say, tell me about this. How does this argument work? He's done articles on it and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting. We have a local guy who's, because this was a kind of a back room argument until the court gave it a whole hour. So I'm struggling. I hope I can get in to see the live oral argument. I've never seen a Supreme Court argument before. And I hope I can get a ticket. I don't know if I can, but I jumped on the line to try to get one. I wish the court would televise it so you can see what's happening. They just don't do the cartoon stuff and the transcript. But this is an amazingly important moment in America, and hopefully it won't be a Bush v. Gore case, where they make it totally political. And the court needs the credibility. They're deciding things according to the law. And if they were to overturn the individual mandate, that would be getting rid of 80 years of Commerce Clause precedent. Now, it is true before the New Deal that they had a much narrower review of government. But ever since the New Deal, it's been settled. Republican judge, Democratic judge, Commerce Clause is broad. If they were to suddenly narrow that, we'd be taking back America to the 1920s. And then for them to roll back Medicaid coercion, that would be astonishing. We would lose highway programs, we would lose tons of stuff. So what I have trouble helping people understand is they think, well, John Roberts, he's conservative, and Alito, he's conservative, and Scalia, we know he's conservative, and Thomas, they don't understand how they're radical conservatives. Like this idea that corporations are people, like that is crazy. That is absolutely flat out crazy.
But that's been a craziness that's been with us since the late 1800s. It just hasn't been.
You're right.
It is fruited and flowered now, but that's, you know.
Well, you're right. But see, this concept of personhood is a complicated thing.
Right.
They were people for purposes of making money,
Right.
for limiting shareholder risk, things like never for free speech, or
Right.
until like the last 20 or 30 years for corporate advertising. Then they made it free speech. And then one thing kind of led to another. This is one instance where the slippery slope, where the camel's nose on its tent gets there. And suddenly, you know, there was a case before the court last year whether corporations have privacy rights, and even voting rights, and like, you know, Lincoln said best, is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The analogy I use in class is this: under the law, corporations are artificial people. That's the legal phrase. Well, that sounds to me a whole lot like robots. You know, like, when are we empowering robots here? But there's another step that they said not only that corporations are people, they also said that money is speech. And it's those two jumps that really gave us Citizens United. And money has some speech-like aspects, but does that mean billionaires get to drown out the voice of all the little people? That would so totally empower the 1% that we really wouldn't have a democracy anymore. So you have to, I think, rein in this court, because people don't realize it's not the liberals being radical, it's the right-wingers being radical.
But what can you really do to rein in the Supreme Court then? I mean, they're an equal branch of the government.
Two things. There's already several constitutional amendments being filed, and that's a long process. And also there's the personnel situation. Over time, court membership changes. And actually, the public has a large say in that. In this article here, in which I talk about fundamental congressional reform, I talk about Citizens United and express the hope, and it's a hope that actually corporations would see this newfound power and shun it because they lose customers if they do bad things.
I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know.
That never
That'd be
works.
interesting.
Do we know if any corporations have really taken advantage of the new law? I mean, I know there's a lot of super PAC, but that seems to be private individuals.
Crazy billionaires have done it. Corporations are much safer. You know, much more. They're afraid of lawsuits. They're afraid of lots of things. And they also do polling.
Right.
If we can get the polls right on Citizens United, and I actually think they're already right. People just say, hey, you know, this isn't what America's all about here. We want to make money, we like business, but we are not for them, you know, becoming people. Because that's just doesn't make sense. So I think there's actually a little more hope here than you think.
Well, in light of Citizens United, should we look at our campaign finance laws to adjust them and remove contribution limits because they're effectively mute?
If it's that's a great question. If it's the Wild West, then maybe we should let everybody
Instant disclosure and.
Yeah. Disclosure is so lame. You know, some of the websites have really helped, so you can track out where the money's going. But usually it's too late. With super PACs, you don't know who they buried their tracks there. You don't know who gave that money. You usually find out after the election, that a billionaire bought the election. There's a great article that was in the New Yorker about 2 months ago. It's about the political takeover of North Carolina. And one guy named Art Pope, for $10 million, controlled the whole state. He targeted 22 state Senate seats. He won 18. And this guy he's bragging about it in the article. He compared a 61-year-old grandmother, and the ads made her a prostitute, and she lost the election. And this guy is proud of this sort of behavior. It's just
His big thing is charter schools too.
Well, I don't know this guy, I never met this guy, but you mentioned the name Art Pope in North Carolina, and he's like the boss. This is not progress to have a 21st century political machine come in. It's not accountable to people. It lies, cheats, steals. And here he is bragging about it in one of the leading publications in the country.
Walton at the North Carolina Democratic Party, I've been talking about what he's done there because we're starting to see some infiltration into Tennessee with the Alec money and the Art Pope money and the Koch brothers. And the one thing that I wanted to ask you is, it seems our messaging is off badly. And how do we change that?
Well, a couple of big questions. First of all, you're exactly right. The ALEC legislation is infecting Tennessee. That was one reason we're worried about redistricting, because to be good little Republicans in their world, they're supposed to bring this legislation and pass it in Tennessee. That's where you're seeing the voter suppression. There's a lot of bills like that. Redistricting may still be part of that at the state Senate and the state House level. We'll have to look exactly how those maps played out. But fortunately, we dodged a bullet at the congressional level. On changing messaging, y'all know more about messaging than I do. What holds and captures the public attention? Well, sometimes it's a water skiing squirrel. You know, sometimes something else. And that is a giant topic that I don't know anybody knows the answer to. Sometimes people are successful in grabbing attention for a while. But
it's almost like we don't have a face. With Dorothy Cooper from Chattanooga, she was a face. She was somebody that we could relate to. She was our grandmother. But we're not doing that with other issues right now. When you look at even in state government, Bill Haslam is talking about redistricting, crime, and education. But recent polls that I've seen are saying that average Tennesseans outside the 440 loop want to talk about jobs, and we're not getting that across, it doesn't seem.
Yeah. Well, other than Dorothy Cooper, there's the lady who cleaned up the governor's office for 30 years.
Right.
And I haven't seen a picture of her in the media. You have to get these folks' permission to do these things. There are ways to get people's attention. It's my understanding right now that the ideal plaintiff in a successful lawsuit would be a college student who attends a state university who has a state-issued ID, but that's deemed not good enough for voting. But how do you find a kid who has a college ID but doesn't have a driver's license? Because your kids love.
Right. Well, and we just don't live in that urban estate. You know, like, there's not that many people who don't drive.
You know, honestly though, from University of Tennessee at Martin, they've seen that a lot of the kids come in from Shelby County and West Tennessee. They don't have cars right now. There's a huge.
Well, that's a good place to look then.
Yeah, honestly, it is, because there was an issue about one of the local Democratic Party with Mark Maddox, who's the head now. He said he couldn't get any young folks in there, so we called and we were like, okay, why aren't you going to meetings? And they said it's very simple. It's 8 miles away, and there's no mass transit. There's nothing like that. So that's the reason why they weren't getting
You're
young
from
people.
Wheatley County, so you know all this stuff. Right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Originally, yes.
In Texas, they can use their gun permit if they don't have it.
Yeah, well, you can use the gun permit here. That counts as a state ID.
Well, you can use a student ID to get a real ID.
I
You
honestly,
can't.
Seriously, go door to
this
door.
week has convinced me that everyone should at least get, whether or not they own a gun, they
Get the
should get a
permit.
gun permit, because I think a bunch of armed Democrats would scare the crap out of the public. Oh yeah, I'm honestly, I'm convinced. Yeah.
Muslims or, you know what I mean? Like not white Christian males.
You know, I was talking to someone this week who pointed out, right, that California's gun laws really went into overdrive when the Black Panthers were like, great, we'll carry.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, oh wait, no, we gotta
That's
have
what we
somebody.
need.
Not too far.
Female Democrats with muzzle loaders. I'm in.
We need a gay, black, Muslim,
Transgender person.
with a carry permit.
Exactly.
And then
Who's
see-
openly carrying her AK-47 or I don't know, whatever.
No, but
Into a bar, right?
I wanted to ask, because I have heard, going back to Citizens United, I have heard there's legislation, I can't remember if it was a Senate bill or a House bill, that was filed to overturn it. And I don't know anything about the particulars, but are you aware of that? Is that something you support?
On Citizens United, there are several constitutional amendments that have been filed. No statute that we know of can touch it because it's a constitutional ruling. at most you could trim the toenails of this monster. You know, to take down the monster, you have to have a constitutional amendment. There are several competing ones. I'm actively considering co-sponsoring the one that's most likely to pass, because sometimes the trouble with progressive people is they fragment, and we have to coalesce and actually plan on winning, not just talking about it. So, but I think you'll see a push this year. It won't pass this year, obviously, with the Republican House. One of the most daunting prospects we face is absent a change in body politic. We hope we can recapture the House, but that's unlikely. And the Senate looks lost because the way the numbers were, we were so successful in 06 and 08 that of the 23 open or Senate seats that are up, all the Republicans have to do is win 4, and that makes it tough. So we have to have a strategy that works. And Clinton was able to do it pretty well, but it's bad enough to have lost one house in Congress to lose both houses, as is maybe not probable, at least likely. We have to deal with that, and sometimes Democrats are slow in putting together a strategy.
Understatement, yes.
I thought we should get Marrero and Richardson guns. But
well, I have a question unrelated to this, and I saw this morning that SOPA is being pulled back.
Yes.
But my question is kind of like in the how bills get made. Like, I assumed with something like that someone from the entertainment industry probably came to a congressperson and said, we have this enormous problem, here is our solution for fixing it. So the congressperson probably doesn't know a lot about the technical details, but agrees, like, okay, this is a problem, there needs to be a law. But when I read through SOPA, I guess the thing that surprised me was that, like, I'm not really a techie person, and the enormous loopholes that would render that legislation immediately ineffective for the thing it was proposed for were so obvious that, like, it just made me, who wrote that? Like, was there
The RIAA.
well, but was there nobody who said, okay, this is what we want to do? I mean, there are plenty of evil tech people, right? Like, we need an evil tech person to tell us how to, like, what terminology we can use to, like, solidly make this unassailable. I mean, but, like, going after a domain name but not the IP address is like, I mean, I know that, and I don't know, I can't even set up my own website. So I just wondered, like, how...
Okay. First of all, your overall thesis is correct. That's the way bills usually get pushed, filed, things like that. The process of legislation, though, is usually one of gradual improvement. Now, sometimes things just blow up and stop right there. They never improve. On some occasions, they get worse. But I think what you've seen with the manager's amendment on SOPA is it made a lot of steps toward improvement. Like last week, the Google guy was here, their top guy, and he basically said he supported 2/3 of the bill. It's been improved that much. He supports the internet advertiser part of the bill and the internet payment processor part of the bill. So that part looks good enough for Google. Now, I'm not saying Google should determine this. They're a special interest like everybody else.
Right.
That was an interesting sort of breakthrough. And in the meeting, nobody nailed him and said, look, if you support this part, what if we reduce the bill to that? Would you support that? One reason for the drafting complexity is the legal issue involved, because we do not have jurisdiction over foreign websites.
Right.
See, already we passed a bill nailing domestic pirates.
Right.
And we have jurisdiction there. So they had to write it in a curious way to try to lasso somebody that they don't have jurisdiction over. And so that makes it awkward, but there's really no legal way around that. We're not going to put a drone on them.
Right.
Although
Right.
they're probably
Yes.
maybe I'm too optimistic. Maybe I'm. I think there's got to be a way to protect our songwriters and keep the internet unbroken. In the Google conversation last week, it basically boiled down to this. It turns out that because of the internet and its infinite flexibility and variety, that real censorship is about impossible.
Yeah.
And thank goodness it's impossible. So what you should use more is a word like filter. And then it turns out that, guess what? Google filters, Bing filters, everybody filters. And for the consumer standpoint, it becomes a question of when is it no longer worth it to steal or cheat? And like iTunes was a great solution because it made it affordable and easy to buy a lot of stuff without doing anything bad. And people flock to that. Maybe not enough, but it's still, people are still looking for a cure. Like there's a good songwriter in town, Bob Regan. He did a Keith Urban hit. In the meeting last week, he got on his laptop, Googled his hit. You know, the top 10 websites, 7 were foreign pirates.
Yeah, but
The first one was advertised with PetSmart, and
Right.
it goes.
But in a way,
Here's
though,
PetSmart benefiting from this.
this is what bothers me about this. Like, I mean, I'm bothered at many levels, like about censorship and stuff. But here's the thing: I'm 37, and I remember when P. Diddy came out and said, "I don't make any money from my music," and he had a big long chart that showed like my song made this much money. And went down the list of all the people that got paid and showed that he made like $100. Now I don't know if those numbers are accurate, but that's what he said, is like he doesn't make anything. And I think a lot of people feel when they're stealing that they're not hurting the artists, because so many artists have come out and complained, I don't make any money from my product and being ripped off by these evil record companies. So I kind of also feel like going after people that you've told, like, right, if I'm stealing from someone who's stealing from you, I don't feel like I'm doing something wrong. So I kind of feel like in some way I'd like to see some acknowledgement from the entertainment community that they need to stop, like, if they're being ripped off by their record companies, that's tragic, but when you tell your fans that you're being ripped off by your record companies, your fans are never going to feel bad about ripping your record companies off. They feel like they're getting even for you.
Yeah.
And I don't, so I'm just troubled by this, like, oh, the people who love the product are wrong. You know, that seems to me there needs to be some soul searching on that end, too. I mean,
There are a lot of moral issues, and they cut a lot of different ways. If you just stand way back and try to look at this cold-eyed, like an economist would, the entertainment issues actually don't predominate. It's probably more of a pharmaceutical issue. Because U.S. folks invent most of the drugs. We're the last folks left on the planet who pay full price. And then other countries pay less and sometimes pay nothing. And then we're bombarded with foreign websites that try to sell us our own medicines back at better prices. And when it's Canada, maybe it's legit, but there's a lot of stuff that comes back and it might not be real, might be counterfeit. You know, certainly it's not supporting the research for new cures.
so is this part of what's behind the Research Works Act?
Well, there's all the intellectual property industries in America are worried about this, and have been worried for decades. They've been unable to do much about it, and this is one of the biggest pushes they've ever made. Although, don't discount what's already happened with domestic pirates. You know, they took down Pirate Bay and sites like that. This is just kind of to put all pirates on a level playing field, because right now foreign pirates are actually advantaged.
Right.
You know, so why should we treat them more favorably? That seems kind of crazy.
Well, but how do you plan on addressing the concerns of libraries about to switch to the Research Works Act? And I know I, as a small-time scholarly publisher, am also concerned about this idea that research that gets public funding can be kept from the public. That's...
Well, I think, if anything, we should move in a different direction, because taxpayers don't get enough return on their money. Taxpayers have funded most of the great advances that have happened, and yet we're the last benefit sometimes. And just because Darrell Issa has sponsored a bill, don't assume it's going to pass. He is a hugely controversial person in the Republican Party. You know, he is still a committee chairman and has a loud voice, but I think we're just starting to hear about this bill. My guess is they will not be able to shut down access to, you know, taxpayer-funded, you know, legitimate scientific information.
Good, good. I mean, yeah, I was just thinking even from my own job, what an enormous headache it would try to be, like...
I've already been hearing like from Vanderbilt people and other academic publishers, hey, let's not do this, but see, you have to watch places like Vanderbilt because sometimes, you know, the university that's benefited the most from taxpayer-funded research is the University of Wisconsin. They have a giant fortune that's been created.
Right.
Because they kind of pioneered this royalty stream, and I'm not against the university, but why are they profiting so much when Vanderbilt's made a lot of great discoveries? But oftentimes behind Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt got a ton of money from the stimulus package. We put it on our website. Who all got the money? Vanderbilt got it.
Right.
And more power to them. They're good at grant writing and all that stuff.
Well, it seems strange to me, and maybe it's just needs to be a tweak in the copyright law, but if the government can't copyright things, it seems like then it becomes a question of if the government gives you a bunch of money, how much has the government then invested? Like, how much ownership does the government have of that? And if they do have ownership, then it can't, to me it seems like there's some issue of whether that even can be copyrighted. If the government owns it, it can't be, that's clear.
It gets complicated.
Do you support legislation to take indefinite detention of American citizens out of the 2012 Defense Appropriations Act? And also, what do you think about Joe Lieberman's legislation proposed to remove citizenship from some Americans?
Well, Joe is kind of an outlaw these days. We're not sure what motivates him on a number of issues. So I need to look into his proposal there. It sounds like you can't do that. You can make somebody a convicted felon and deprive them of the right to vote. Have we ever stripped citizenship from anybody before? I've never. That's a whole new thing.
The 14th Amendment would supposedly ban that, but...
And what would happen? You can't have people without countries. That would...
No. The indefinite detention for an American citizen thing, this is a murky presidential powers and Supreme Court issue. I think the current law on that is if, they're a proven terrorist or there are a lot of factors here that they can be detained, but it is infinitely worrisome anytime it's a citizen and this has happened. But the case gets more complicated. Guess what? Al-Awlaki was an American citizen, and we took him out with a drone in a foreign country that's not an acknowledged battlefield. But to add another layer of complexity is, when was the last war the U.S. declared? World War II. So Congress has failed miserably to make sense of this murky area. Like, Vietnam wasn't big enough to be a war. Korea wasn't big enough to be a war. Iraq, Afghanistan, this is getting crazy here. So this whole part of the Constitution has almost died on us. One thing we need to reinvigorate is make sense of it somehow, because the old rules are not working anymore. And so everybody's afraid of kind of the Republican doctrine of permanent war, in which you so superpower the executive that you really don't have laws and protections anymore. Well, President Obama is trying to get us away from that concept. He's successfully wound down the war in Iraq. Although we're already hearing the war drums beating, we'll get back in. Well, what good would that do? Afghanistan, another hellhole. He's trying in a safe and responsible way to move there. Because we're already hearing more drums beat about Iran.
Not to be flip, but do you ever wonder, did your colleagues not watch the Rainbow movies? Honestly, but right? It was all a big joke, oh, haha, the Russians are in Afghanistan, what dumbasses. And then we turn around but not us, we are somehow going to be smarter and more able than the Russians? It just boggles my mind.
Well, it's a little bit like your messaging problem. Like and it's an exciting thing. In the 21st century, average citizens are more empowered than they've ever been before. So they actually have more say than they've ever had. Now, ironically, at the same time, they feel more detached. But whether it's public opinion polls or blogging or tweeting or things like that, the individual voice has never been louder. And in a way, that's exciting. But in a way, it also makes democracy more volatile. Because a wave will go through, it might be something silly like American Idol, and then all of a sudden, boom, not even the President of the United States can speak on that night. Because it might interfere with the program. It's like, so, and part of it's the dethronement of elites. A lot of things are going on now. So it's both good and bad, and we have to figure out this two-edged sword, how to make it good. Because I'm always amazed how folks complain, and then they don't realize that they're part of the problem. Pogo said this years ago in the cartoon, we met the enemy and he is us. In a democracy, the people have a right to be right and a right to be wrong.
What direction do you see journalism going?
Oh my God, I'm terrified there. And it's not that in any way I'm against new media, but unless I can at least save it on a hard drive, or ideally clip it out, it's hard for me to remember stuff. Like my oral memory is not very good. My visual memory is a lot better. So I don't want to make you think I'm prehistoric, but I love scrapbooks. Because then you can see and remember what page it is, and then you can see if somebody's contradicting themselves. And I'm worried in this electronic age, there's not much accountability. Look how many times people flip-flop, and they don't even flip in the same direction. It's flopping.
I think there's more accountability, actually. I mean, because if you think about it, the stuff that Mitt Romney says, it takes 10 minutes on a Nexus search to find what he said 20 years ago, whereas before, you would have had to spend 20 hours going through tapes.
Yeah, but then you end up, with the New York Times public editor asking yesterday whether they should fact check their stories.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, please do, please.
That is just offensive.
I mean, I know that
But it's a resource argument
right.
as well.
Well, and I know that they don't want to get lost in the weeds, but seriously, Jim Cooper, if you sat here and said, last week I voted for two-headed cats, I certainly hope whoever wrote this up would be like, A, there's no such thing as two-headed cats, and B, no.
I've seen it on the internet.
Alright, fair enough. But just that basic, I don't expect everything, but I do expect blatant weird falsehoods to be pointed out.
I think this is one of these things where it's essentially there's truth on both sides here, but the ability to make a sustained, complex argument has almost been eliminated. We've moved so much toward infotainment, but a lot of the times what the candidates are responding to is the flavor of the month. And I would argue today that President Obama has been most successful in the areas that the media has covered the least. And because once you get Congress involved and you get this media firestorm, then it's hard to make sense out of anything. If you had a vote today in the U.S. Senate, on whether today is Saturday, you would have trouble breaking a filibuster. And see, on some of the biggest issues, to me, these would be some big issues. First of all, we've lost our Congress. We've gradually lost it over time. It's now a parliament. Because it used to be congressmen would vote their party 70, 80% of the time. Now it's 95% plus. Otherwise, you're an outcast, a pariah. We've also lost majority rule in Congress because the filibuster, it's obvious, the power of the minority. But starting with Speaker Hastert in the House, they say openly, we only listen to a majority of the majority. And that basically means that with Republicans holding 240 seats, that basically if you have 121 Republican votes, the rest of Congress be damned. So both the House and the Senate now have a filibuster type problem, but it's only acknowledged in the Senate. See, a lot of these things, when folks have a short attention span and this football game on TV, people don't focus anymore. So I have a devil of a time even getting out basic things, but I still try to do it. I met with the Tennessee bankers this week and asked them, as I ask every group, left, right, middle, why aren't you for real accounting for the federal government? No subject on earth is more boring than accounting. But hey, these are bankers, so they can, and they don't have a reason. And lots of times they don't even know that we're using fake numbers. The big thing this last week was the deficit got over $15 trillion and is now equal with the GDP. So our debt equals our income as a nation. Well, that's a lot. Because That's only our cash deficit. Our real deficit is at least 62 trillion, probably closer to 100 trillion. So we blew past that, warning sign years ago. But nobody wants to acknowledge that. So we're living in a dream world. And, again, accounting is boring, but basic business people, even, country business people get this issue. The average Rotarian understands this issue. You can't measure it, you can't manage it. In Congress, both parties are deliberately, systematically refusing to manage it. Let me show you this thing here. This came out. Oops, I'm not going to copy there. This was released Christmas Eve. And y'all have heard me talk about it before. 6 years ago, I got a book out on the topic. It's basically a reprint of this document. I just did the introduction. Well, here, and I love the Obama administration. They issued it on Christmas Eve with no press release. This is the only government document where the real number is in it. And it's terrifying. That's a free download on the web. But they put it on the front of the web page? No. You have to dig in the Treasury website or the GA website. And then, they make it jargony. And so here's a letter on the front page from the Secretary of Treasury, not because he wants to do it, but because Senator John Glenn Law makes him write this letter. See, if we don't get real on things like this, we don't have a chance of managing our way out of the problem.
Do you think that the Occupy movement wasted time flipping the script away from the deficit to issues of unemployment and fair wages and the distribution of wealth in America?
I do not. I think they served a useful purpose in balancing the debate, because no issue is just about numbers or budgets or accounting. The numbers are only important because they either help or hurt people. So remember the Lincoln quote is the best one: government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, I believe if you get your budget right, then you are empowering the people. And if you lie to people about the budgets, you're just going to hurt them one day, because if you don't keep up with your credit card, you're just fooling yourself and everybody. So I don't see these issues as clashing. I see them as compatible. And I would credit the Occupy folks with genius, and this is the sort of wiki crowdsourcing genius, because I don't think anybody necessarily intended this, but it happened. When all of a sudden they changed the messaging, billionaires couldn't have done that. But these poor folks who are freezing their tails off in the cold somehow were able to do it.
Did you know it was all George Soros's plot?
But see,
I think it has changed the messaging, because we're not getting as much Tea Party on national news. And there's places here in the state that's all you get. We forget that because it's such a long state that if you go into pockets, you're not getting Tennessee news on your television sets because of satellite. So the message they're getting is Fox and CNN and listening to Steve Gill and Rush Limbaugh on the radio. I mean, there's areas that don't even have NPR in this stuff.
It started rebalancing the debate. Now, it would be great if it could move to Occupy 2.0 or 3.0, where there was more effective organization and spokespeople. But that's kind of antithetical. It's kind of like the Democratic Party. Will Rogers said he didn't belong to any organized political parties. So, I don't know how you're feeling. I'm feeling that American democracy is actually more alive today than it's been for a while, because people are paying attention. And that's a good thing. They're discovering some things they should have seen all along. Like the Congress has a bunch of clowns in it and some crooks.
Well, now don't you feel like a lot of people, I see this even in the Tea Party, and they did not know how the government worked, or is even supposed to work, and were shocked, right? Like, I think they really thought, and I mean, we see this on the Democratic side all the time, right, that President Obama should just be able to come out and order people around like he's the king. And they've had to become aware, like, no, we have 3 branches of government that are supposed to be kind of equal.
And they're not too sure about that judicial branch.
Right, exactly. I think that part has been good, that more people are becoming aware. Like, it's now embarrassing when somebody comes and is like, well, I'm just a country lawyer, I don't know about the government. And you're like, really, but you wanted to be in Congress? So I think that's...
I see this as a teacher. You can't straight lecture anymore. You can't just use PowerPoint slides. It has to be a participation thing. Otherwise, people are not learning.
sense of things is that a lot of what we're talking about here is just so much noise, and it really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. Saying that as a blogger, I'm part of the noise, but the more I read about things that people are actually doing, like related to climate change, things that companies are doing, that there seems to be under the bumpy ocean, affirmative things are happening, good things are happening, changes are happening. People know climate change is real. I mean, aside from the Tea Party, and aside from the Koch brothers, and aside from all the noise and the op-ed pieces, none of that matters, because the people that it really affects, the industries, the businesses, those people are making changes already. And so the rest of this is kind of pointless, and it kind of bothers me sometimes when our representatives in Washington sort of take part in the noise. I know we want messaging and I know all that other stuff, but it's like, what function do you really have if you're just sort of adding to all the hot air and the partisan bickering when, you know, things really are happening, and it's just on a level that's hidden from those.
I think you're making a super powerful point. It's a little bit like the point I was making earlier where Obama's been most successful when it's been less hyped. It's a challenge because we are for the First Amendment, we're for free speech, we're against censorship. So you don't want to keep people from watching, but lots of times it's the superficial or the noisy that predominates. So I don't want to sound offensive, but I think I'm one of the more substantive, less hot air people that come around. But I'm a bad politician because under the rules today, if you don't make a lot of noise, then you're not, you know, on MSNBC or you're not on Fox. Those polarizing forces predominate. So I love analysis of what's really going on, trying to get at the truth. I spend most of my day, every day, just trying to cut through the hype and the bullshit, because in Washington they have these things called fact sheets, and every group tries to give you a fact sheet. There's not a fact on it. You know, these are all lies, but they're carefully spun lies by these giant corporate organizations. But underneath, you're right, and I think sometimes it has more to do with, say, the CEO at Exxon, what his daughter or son is telling him, like, Daddy, what are you doing to help the environment? And that changes the thought process up there. But, you know, sometimes they get burned. BP's giant oil company, the oil rig in the Gulf was their deal. They had the tagline Beyond Petroleum. But they're massive investments by corporate America, by what are perceived as the bad guys. Dow Chemical, Hemlock, Solar, and Clarksville. It's like, these are not hippies. You know, these are. So.
But I think that goes back to what Lisa's saying, though, right? Like, whether, you know, like terms like peak oil get thrown out by like radical crazy, I, you know, have 14 MRIs per day in my basement or whatever, but like apparently the oil companies are also concerned about what a post-oil world will look like, and they're already, like you said, they're already making these changes. So it's like, you know, and I think the same is true even with climate change, right? Like whether or not the party line is that it's true, corporations are already changing their behavior.
And we can help them along. Like Nissan came up with a Leaf, and that's great. But the federal government gave them a $1.2 billion battery factory here in Tennessee, a gift. You know, so, and to buy a Leaf, there's a $7,500 tax credit with it. These are major government involvements.
I'm a Leaf owner. I appreciate
okay.
tax credit.
We're going to the dealership this afternoon. There's only one guy here. We went already, and they will only let one person sell a Leaf.
Yeah.
You can't talk to anybody else. Is he a good guy?
Yeah.
We haven't met him yet. Yeah.
He sold one to the Frisk. The Frisk family are, this is what I'm talking about, the Frisk family are huge Leaf people, apparently.
Lamar has one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll love it.
Did you have a question, Drew, earlier, or I don't want to equally distribute all this?
Well, speaking of Lamar, he gave up his leadership position so he could have more flexibility in what he said. Do you think more members might do that? And how are the Blue Dogs doing now?
Well, the truth about Congress is a lot of the backbenchers in both parties actually get along. Because pretty much anybody in politics is friendly by nature. That's their personality. But the higher you climb up, the worse you get. Because it's like this funnel. And I think it will be liberating for Lamar to leave leadership. He will be able to act less like a parliamentary guy and more like a congressperson. And that is great. Now, he was already frisky for the Republicans. Now, that's for the Republicans. But on the environment, he's actually been pretty good. He and Victor Ashe did a report under George H.W. Bush that was so good, it was censored by the Bush administration. They refused to allow that report to come out. And I was like, yeah, you guys. That's a backhanded compliment if there's ever been one from the Bush use to not let it come out. So, but there are, most Tennessee folks are not in leadership. We're just regular folks. But what's happened in Congress is that there are no committees anymore, really. We have committees, but they don't matter. It's all a speaker decision. But under the parliamentary rules, it's all top down. So what we need to do is restore Congress so that we can have groups of expertise and make the committees work again. There was a hearing 2 months ago, the Foreign Affairs Committee, where the chairman of the committee had never heard of Germany's leader, Angela Merkel. We look like morons. Or the intelligence chair a couple of years before that, intelligence committee, this is all the secret stuff, CIA, NSA, everything like that. He didn't know the difference between Sunni and Shia. This guy is a moron. He's a super nice guy, but oh my gosh. So there are opportunities here to restore democracy, to rebuild things, using some new media stuff, increasing the accountability, but also let's have competency testing too. Because if you don't know what you're talking about, maybe you shouldn't be there. And there are tons of folks who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, what elections are for.
You're right, but see, a lot of voters are lazy and they don't participate, they don't know, they want it done for them, something like term limits. And I'm worried that term limits would pretty much say, oh, that client will be gone in 8 years anyway, whenever the term limit is up. We don't have to show up every 2 years and focus and care. Elections are incredibly therapeutic for the system, but our turnout is not what it should be. And with these voter suppression efforts, turnout could be even lower.
But isn't the Occupy movement part of that backlash against the fact that elections don't matter? People don't feel like they make a difference. That's why they don't show up. I'm not speaking for everybody who doesn't show up, but how bigger would the turnout be if the people who are holding general assemblies across their own general assemblies across the country felt like they hopefully made a difference?
An idea that I'm for, I've already been on nationwide TV on this, is talking about moving more toward an Australian type system, where basically everybody has to vote. You get 95% turnout, and they've had this since the 1920s. That would empower everybody. Because some people say elections don't matter and make that argument, but Mitt Romney only won Iowa by 8 votes. Count them.
And he gets all the delegates.
Well, they haven't assigned delegates yet. So. But, how do you think that system has made Australian political system? Has it made it better? Has it just been that?
What it does is it stabilizes the politics, because today the fringes control, because they're the only folks energized and ideological enough to really engage. If you have to vote, and there's a harsh way to do it, which they do in Australia, which is a $10 or $15 fine.
Right.
But there could be a positive way to do it. Say you got $10 or $15 off your taxes. That's a carrot instead of a stick. I bet you would see massive turnout, because it's amazing how powerful economics is. It's like a coupon in the newspaper. It's like Groupon. That stuff works. Because people are hungry for a break. And most people in their hearts know that's the right thing to do anyway. It's just a hassle, and we make it hard because voting on Tuesday, find it on the weekend. Why don't you have, say, a 48-hour period to do it? See, now there's a movement on, because the Republican Party, they do not benefit in their ideal world. And I've had this argument made to me by folks. They really only want wealthy, white.
Yeah, they want. That's what I firmly believe. When they talk
So the
about, you know, we
Constitution
gotta
said-
do it like the Constitution. They're not kidding. They
Yeah.
mean before the changes.
I think mandatory voting is a really bad idea. I think not voting is free speech. Like people are saying that.
In Australia, you don't have to vote. You just have to show up at the polls.
Do you have to have a photo ID?
Well, they do that there. They have an island nation, so that's a little easier.
What do you think? I mean,
They brought this idea into the country club out north.
is part of our problem the fact that, like, well, Australia might have a different system because it's more of a national system, whereas we are a federalist system that has 50 state laws on voting. I mean, can we do these sort of fixes to reform our political movement when we have such a federalist system in place?
Our Constitution makes it deliberately hard.
Right.
Federalism is a classic built-in inefficiency, but it's also built-in flexibility and freedom. So are states laboratories of democracy, or are states foot draggers? Well, we're about to find out here in Tennessee with the health reform exchange. And will our state get its act together and have a Tennessean-friendly shopping mechanism? And this is all private insurance we're talking about here. This isn't socialism. Or will we foot drag, and then the federal government will come in and run our exchange, which might not be as Tennessee friendly. You know, so this is an opportunity for us to get our act together. One helpful activity, I don't know if y'all want to engage in it, if you look at all the different things where Tennessee has sacrificed its leadership before, and this has happened under governors of both types. I know for a long time the federal government ran our mining program in the state because we did not have the guts to face our own coal companies. The federal government has run our prisons. The federal government has run some of our schools. You know, over time, the federal government's run our foster care and adoption program. You know, we have hunted when, you know, sometimes Tennesseans can come up with a better solution than anybody else. But that's when we engage, and that's when we care about our own people. And it's just easier sometimes to not only let Uncle Sam do it, but blame Uncle Sam. Meanwhile, Uncle Sam is giving Tennessee, I think it's about $10 billion a year. $10 billion, and they badmouth us all the time. Well, you know, let's see Tennessee come up with that money. You know, it's like, so we get blamed for taxing people, and we turn over huge amounts. So the state can do anything it wants to with the money. Medicaid, dish money is a classic example. That's basically a slush fund for governors. There are no rules on how they spend that money, and they love that program. And many states like Tennessee have usually spent that money responsibly on health care for poor people. Some states haven't spent a dime of that money on health care for poor people. We don't have the guts at the congressional level to tighten up that loophole and say, hey guys, you get the money, you spend it on poor people.
Will that be exacerbated if the Republicans were to take charge and do block granting for all Medicaid?
Probably would. You know, it depends on how they define the block grant, but there are parts of it already. See, we're used to, they put it in our messaging. We know the phrase unfunded mandate. You're supposed to hate that as soon as you hear the phrase. Well, they're funded unmandates too, and we haven't popularized that phrase yet. So,
We'll work on that.
Well, and again, this is not so much about advocacy or partisanship, it's just truth-telling. Like, look up the numbers. One of the charts I hand out in all the civic clubs, I don't know if we have one here today, is federal spending and revenues for the last 40 or 50 years. And you see, for all of our hoopla and political bickering, the noise you're talking about, the Democratic and Republican presidents have been remarkably the same for many years. You know, this with a couple of exceptions, like Republicans hate Obama for big government right now. Well, the previous record holder post-World War II was Ronald Reagan. You know, Ronald Reagan. But see, they cannot handle that in their world. But see, these are the facts, and that's the previous record holder, Ronald Reagan. The most conservative president post-World War II was Bill Clinton.
These are the presidents, their proposed budgets, or these are actual budgets passed by Congress?
Yeah. And in general, Congress has appropriated plus or minus 2% from presidential budgets. Presidents have the bully pulpit. Occasionally we tweak it a little bit, but it's only a tweak.
Why didn't we pass a budget when the Democrats had control of Congress?
Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi. And you know, I'm not dissing these people as people, but it's largely the districts they represent.
Yeah.
You know, in my opinion, Nevada shouldn't even be a state. They should be a territory again. The voice of Nevada are the gambling interests, and they own a big hunk of Congress. There are hardly any people out there. There are more jackrabbits than people. So they have so much money that any party leader who's in trouble, and it's all about money, they know that tomorrow morning they could have a fundraiser, Sunday morning in Las Vegas, and raise $300,000.
That's why we need to fix this. The problem is
Legalize gambling everywhere.
you can have mandatory voting, but all you're going to do is get a bunch of ignorant people showing up at the polls, you know, voting based on whatever Americans for Prosperity flooded the airwaves with. But seriously, why can't we get just some kind of election reform that takes the corporate money out?
Well, after Citizens United, the task became harder. We've got to amend the Constitution or change the membership of the court. So, pending that, to me, let's both look into the Australia experience more. I think what you'll find, and don't take my word for it, but take an acknowledged election expert like, say, Norm Ornstein. He thinks that the centrists will prevail, because most people are moderate, common sense people. There's this amazing book. It's called The Wisdom of Crowds. It's by the New Yorker economics writer, James Surowiecki. It talks about how, and this is actually the way lots of markets work. Somehow, even though individual people are wrong, collectively there's a wisdom there. There's a common sense. Maybe it's a bullshit detector, where people look through that stuff and say, that makes sense.
That flies in the face of political realism. I mean, political realism suggests that people actually do more harm to groups than they would individually.
Well, the counter book, the counter book written like in the 17 or 1800s is Extraordinary Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Yeah. You weigh those two books, my guess is, and I don't want to speak for you, that you'll be persuaded by the Surowiecki book. It's an amazing thing. And I don't want to be naive, but in my experience, just walking down the street, we either have activist control, in which case the other side will always have more money and power, the 1%, or you have people control, in which once people step up and acknowledge that responsibility, most people are decent-hearted people. You know, that's been my experience, and I go to a lot of weird places.
Well, I would support that reform if the other piece of the reform was every ballot had to indicate who the incumbents were. Because I think that change would, because I'm really politically astute, and there are times when I get in there and I look at the ballot and I'm like,
especially for judges.
Right, yeah, I don't know who these people are, I forget which one I wanted. But I think if people knew that when they went in there, because then you could say like, oh, the incumbent, okay, he's doing a good job. Oh, the incumbent, oh, I hate him, vote him out. I think that would be an interesting shorthand way of...
Ballot proxies are an interesting question. In less developed countries where there's mass illiteracy, they use pictures or symbols. And in Pakistan, one party is like the, elephant party, the other party is like the tiger party. And the way they commit ballot fraud in Pakistan is they don't have a picture of the tiger there. They have a picture of a little pussycat. And no male Pakistani voter will vote for the pussycat. So once you start adding layers, other than the name, and some people have gotten around the requirement. Like, remember Byron Low Tax Looper?
Yes.
There's a colorful.
Shoot your opponent. Yeah.
The ancient trick, when Jack Kennedy ran for Congress, they put 3 Jack Kennedys on the ballot, and that was their real name. They'd go around and troll for folks with the same name as the incumbent, just to confuse people.
Speaking of incumbents, I was going to say, have you had a chance to meet any of your likely new constituents?
I haven't been to Dixon County yet. I did not want to go until the map was passed. But now, I guess the governor will sign it shortly. Then I'll head over to Dixon County. I already knew a bunch of Dixon County people. As you were saying, there are a bunch of Vanderbilt refugees who already lived over there. And Jeff Carr is probably one of the leading examples. So the top folks at Vanderbilt lived over there for years. In fact, Joe Billy Wyatt over there too. So it wasn't just...
Well, I know a ton of people that I work with who live out there. Like, if people don't live in Nashville, the joke is they live in Dixon.
Yeah.
Don't go there today. No, I'm telling. When I was driving in from Bellevue, there was a terrible wreck. I mean, we're talking burning cars. We're talking 2 18-wheelers. It was back to about 5 miles.
I had a question about the president announced a plan yesterday to sort of streamline federal government agencies. Is that a real solution or is that a gimmick?
I think he's starting to practice the Bill Clinton approach of micro solutions.
Yeah.
So that he can show he's doing something and something that's popular, and maybe it'll have an impact. But adding the small business administrator to the cabinet, cabinet's already been,
I was going through the line item outlays, and they had already projected by 2016 like a $200 billion drop off in the administration. So is this already something planned at the repackaging, or is this something really new?
I hadn't heard of it before. I think it's a new initiative, but kind of a smaller initiative. But this sort of thing could be done in hundreds of places across government. The trouble is the entrenched interests. Like one of my favorite blue dogs was Charlie Stenholm from Texas. Honest, sincere, nice man. But even Charlie had a weakness. It was called mohair. And mohair is a type of goat or something, or goat,
Right.
It was used in World War I uniforms. But once Texas goat farmers got hold of the mohair subsidy, they couldn't let it go. And that was World War I. So even a Charlie gets whipsawed by stuff like that. I found when I was a new congressman, the pimento lobby. Somehow I was in trouble with the little red thing in the olive. Like, oh my God, who knew? And the voice of the pimento in Washington, they're all around Crossville, Tennessee, pimento growers. And see, this is what happens to Washington, because everybody wants their voice. Hardly anybody trusts their elected leader, and they want to know whether you're pro or con pimentos. And like, to me, there are bigger issues than that, but there are now 30 to 60 lobbyists for every one of us. And a bunch of them represent. Jack Abramoff's breakthrough was the whole for-profit world was already represented. He invented representing the non-profit world. Indian tribes, governments in the Pacific where most people didn't even know we had territories or possessions. It's just astonishing stuff. Some churches and things like that. So back to campaign finance, this is killing us.
Right.
And public financing would help. Short elections would help. Like, I wish we could get to the British system where there's an intense 3 weeks, people focused, and then it's over.
2 months. None of this presidential election that started the day after Obama was inaugurated. That's crazy.
This is like permanent war on the political front.
It's permanent war on the people because I can't handle
That would
it
take a
anymore.
constitutional amendment to change. I mean, you can't. It's freedom of speech, so.
Well, if you had not a fixed term, but a no confidence vote. See, we are a parliamentary system without the advantages of a parliament. Because with a parliament, you have a prime minister who can actually get something done. If they got a majority, they rule. And if you don't like it, then you switch. We are locked in and sense the worst of both worlds right now. But for us not to realize we've lost our Congress and have a parliament is a truly amazing thing.
Well, I think the voters, I mean, if you look at polls, they have. I mean, to have, I don't know if there's any point in history where both parties have been so unpopular at the same time. And
I think they know they may not know their parliamentary system. They may not have the vocabulary to say that that's the issue, but I think Sean's right. They know something is dreadfully wrong.
And see, this to me illustrates the wisdom of crowds I was talking about, where somehow this common sense is out, like something is dreadfully wrong. They are right.
As long as it's an inclusive democratic process, then yes, if the conditions are created for the crowd to make those decisions, then it works. But you've also got groupthink, you've also got mob rule.
Right. I mean,
there are any number of variables at the extreme that kind of defy that.
A huge crowd likes Sarah Palin.
And it's word soup. It's a lot of GOP word soup because it's not tort reform, it's caps on damages.
It's not socialized medicine. It's a private for-profit system that we're forced to buy into.
Well, let's continue that discussion and check out the book. Maybe I'm crazy, but it made a big impression on me. It's just like, whoa.
Have you ever sponsored rules changes in the House? I mean, or pushed for?
But see, this is one of the things that's probably hard folks understand. There are different ways of being effective in the House, and being loud and obnoxious is not necessarily. That's a great way to be on MSNBC. Like the classic example is Bernie Sanders. You know, he is a great guy, and he's a rabble rouser, and he's almost completely ineffective. You know,
it depends on how you define effectiveness. If he shifts the debate, he supported Occupy, and that support helped, actually, I believe, helped Occupy.
But, well, there are different ways of looking at it. You know, there are only two independents in the Senate. One is Bernie, the other is Joe Lieberman. You know, and I'm not actually a big fan of the party structure. I think parties are antiques in some ways. They can be revived and they're stronger sometimes than others. But neither party has a monopoly on wisdom. But it just, you know, I'm a little bit affected because my roommate is the congressman from Vermont. He is much more effective. Has the same, but well, you never heard of him. You know, he gets stuff done. Every once in a while he's on MSNBC, but it's just. There are different ways. Pat Leahy's much more effective. You know, so it's a tricky thing, and what would be a good example? You know, show horse, workhorse, that sort of thing.
Marsha Blackburn was voted the most attractive. Most attractive congressman.
I tried to get that study, and they wanted to charge me $35 on the web to access that study. I said, I'm not spending $35 on that. But
You fired it.
that has a big look.
This store has been fired.
Yeah.
Look at what you know. The whole Fox MO was like of their 36 anchors, like 34 are blonde females. You know, it's like
I can't tell them apart. I swear I can't. I mean, I don't watch Fox News that often unless it's on. I can't tell them apart.
Well, you can't
It's
discriminate
outrageous,
against
you know.
blondes. They can have
I was back when we were crack.
Alan Grayson goes back to the money thing, because if the Democratic Party wants to be raising money, then they need these vocal people out there that are, you know.
It's fine for it to be a gadfly. That is a legitimate role. That's an important role. I was talking about internal effectiveness. Like, would be a good example. I don't know. And people kind of sense the difference. There's some folks you trust them all the way, and you know, like if you were arrested and you had a phone call you could make, who would you call? That's a trust relationship. And there's some folks who you probably wouldn't call because they might not come help you in jail. They might want to get on TV, and you don't know what exactly they'll say, but it will be definitely to their political advantage back home. See, remember the diverse constituencies in this country. You know, some parts of America are just totally different. And I'm not saying they're bad people. Although, well, Las Vegas, I'm not too fond of that. but it's just, and that's the glory of America. This wild and crazy diversity. You know.
Speaking of diversity, I was going to ask you, do you think there's any chance in your Lumbee legislation passing, or do you just put that forward as a favor to those guys?
Well, I don't know much about that issue. I have friends on both sides, like Mike McIntyre, who represents Lumberton, or Lumbeaton, swears they're a tribe. Heath Schuler says they're not a tribe and have never been. And this gets into a lot of murky history. The folks we know are a tribe we haven't done anything for are the Cherokees that Andrew Jackson decimated. But there's some real abuses in this tribal thing. There's a tribe in LA that all my colleagues are buzzing about because it only has like 400 members, but somehow they got the closest casino to LA, and each tribal member, man, woman, and child, makes $200,000 a month now. A month. So these guys write checks like you would not believe. And I've forgotten the name of this tribe, but this is outrageous. Are they helping fellow Indians with this money? They're trying to buy influence. It is one of the biggest scams ever. And now there's a proposed bill in Congress where, regardless of where your territory was, you can have a casino anywhere within 500 miles of the territory. So there's a northern Michigan tribe that wants a casino down in Detroit and stuff like that. Then Katie bar at the door. You know, this is it. And see, that's what's happening. You know, and now we're about to have online gambling, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Well, it also seems like it raises issues for the other triracial isolate groups, right? Like if the Lumbee are considered Indians, then why can't the Melungeon be?
Good for you for knowing about Melungeons. I've tried for years. I used to represent Hancock County, and so many people laugh at me when I talk about Melungeons. Well, I've met Melungeons.
Well, there's a whole bunch that live out in Bell's Bend. Not a whole bunch. There's like 4 or 5
Bell's
families.
Bend?
Yeah, they came over. The Hoolans are Melungeons, and they ran like their Cleese's ferry is rowed out there. The Clee brothers who ran the ferry hired Hoolans, who were Melungeons, to run the ferry when that was there. And so other Melungeons came out and settled in the Bend. There used to be a colored school out there that was specifically for them. The Barneses, who were involved in Maytown, were on the side of Maytown. Like, I ran into them at their cemetery, and you'd know instantly when you saw them that they were Melungeon. Now their sons and grandsons.
Have they done DNA testing now to figure out origins?
Well, it's pretty clear that what they said they are. They've always said they're Portuguese Indians with some African, and they do appear to be Portuguese and Native American with some African.
This is one of the more amazing mysteries of America.
Yeah.
Here, it's. Y'all probably have to run. I've got to run. We've got an MLK thing coming up. Thank you for coming, and let's do this again. If you want to do it, I don't want to impose on anybody, but
Thanks for having us.
happy to.
Yeah, thank you very much.